Hi, my name is Jeff Schwartz, and today I'm going to speak about Washington State's Eosinophilic Gastrointestinal Law that went into effect in 2014. Today we're going to speak a little bit about how I got started, tips and tricks to remain organized, the importance of open communication, the importance of motivation, the inner workings of the legislature, and wrapping up with things that I learned. The goal today is to offer assistance to people new to advocating to change state laws and to provide some insight into our successful bid in Washington State. So to start off, I want to talk a little bit about how and why I got involved. So my son was diagnosed with eosinophilic gastritis at 6 months. He was on a medical food as his primary source of nutrition as we food trialed for 3 years. During that time, our insurance carrier denied our coverage for EleCare, and it was very expensive. And so we felt, my wife and I, that everyone in Washington State who needed a medical food should have equal access regardless of financial means. And so once my son stopped needing EleCare, we committed that we were going to change the laws in Washington State so that no family had to choose between the health of their child and financial well-being. So in 2013 and 14, we had 2 successful bills pass the state of Washington's legislature. The bill in 2013 required the Department of Health to do a sunrise review, and then in 2014 we passed the law, which goes into effect in 2015. So getting started could be daunting for some people. And the first thing that I did was reached out to Victoria and AppFed and other people in Washington State to see if there were any other current campaigns going on. So the big thing I had to figure out was, am I joining an existing campaign or am I starting something new? In my case, I found out that they had two previous attempts in Washington State, neither of which were successful, but no current campaigns. And so I spent upwards of about 2 months doing research on my own, both on the World Wide Web and on the state website, looking for answers to questions that I had and to questions that I knew that other people were going to have as I met them. I did a lot of research on other states and their attempts, both successful and in progress. And at one point, after about a month and a half, I finally felt comfortable that I had enough information that I could start asking other people. And that was really the big important part of getting started. So the first was research, that I feel comfortable speaking about the terms about EGIDs and the legislative process. But then also I was building my network. Every person that I met was important to overall success. And the big thing that I learned was it's important to learn from other people, as you may be learning from this right here, but you have to differentiate and tailor to your particular situation. In my case, I knew that there were 2 previous attempts in my state, both of which that were defeated because of fiscal they were just too expensive. And so I tailored the the language so that it would be more focused and cost less. So some tips and tricks to remain organized. The first big one is know what your success looks like. You have to have a written down plan. There are many points and turns and twists during the process where you really have to evaluate if this is really taking you closer to where you want to go or is it taking farther away. And having that success is really important because you're going to meet a lot of really important people and you're going to be doing a lot of important things, but not all of them are apparent that they may be helping or hurting you. I also kept copious amounts of notes. I had a digital notebook, which is basically a Word document where I have over 60 pages of notes. Whenever I chatted with someone or I asked for information or when I had to do vote counting, I just took a note. And it was really important to keep this kind of meticulous notes because you meet so many different people and sometimes you meet them more than once. It's really nice to be able to go back and refer to your notes about what you talked about, what you need to follow up on, who I had written thank you notes to, who I hadn't, and the changing landscape of legislative assistance. It's all a lot to keep in your head, so keeping notes is really, really important. I also leverage spreadsheets quite often. And that came down to vote counting or when I was doing research, because a lot of times I had to go back and refer to these notes, and it was really nice to have them in a digital form so that I could see them from anywhere. And then finally, when I was in the Capitol, which I did make a trip down quite often when the legislature was in session, I would keep a pocket guide. And the pocket guide was, in essence, a table, a printed table, of all the people that I had met and people that I had meetings with. And it was really nice to have the guide in my pocket, because then I could take notes. I could say who I met, who I hadn't, what did I talk about, who was I meeting next, and I can also know where I should sit in the relation to my next meeting. So these little tricks and tips really helped me stay organized as I was doing this campaign. Communication is another really important aspect of being successful in this kind of volunteering. So to keep my stakeholders informed, I did a monthly communication. It was a simple one page. It was completely opt-in, so anyone that had communicated with me, particularly in the community, not as much the legislators, I would send a one-pager about what I had done, what I'm working on. It was just about a 2-year campaign for me, and there's a lot of periods where it didn't seem like a whole lot was going on, but there was a lot of research going on, or reaching out to people, or small conversations that was really important to keep people abreast of what I was doing. It also helped them help me, because I was sharing what I was up to, what I was thinking. They could then respond back with what they were thinking. And then finally, it really helped to keep my issue, or this issue, top of mind for them. So again, it was more of my volunteer base, it was the people that I work with, it was my family, it was far less the legislature themselves. I had another communication channel that I kept them informed. Another big one that you'll see, myself included, is the news outlets. So newspapers, radio stations, TV, to try to get your story out. I had some success with this, mostly local papers. Other people are way more ambitious in this particular one. I think that it's definitely a great tool. With an issue like EGIDS, where there was far lower public understanding about the issue, I don't think it drove the same kind of draw as some other issues may. But some people have had great success here, and I have minimal, but I think it's a great tool, particularly around communicating. I had a lot of people, when our story ran on NPR, come stop me in the halls at work, or send me an email about that they were proud of the work that I was doing. And so it is a great tool. And then particularly for the lawmakers, it's really, really important to internalize the fact that if you're not speaking to a lawmaker in person, it's not being heard. They get inundated with paper, either through the mail or email, voicemail, that it's just not getting through the barrier. You have to get time with them for them to really understand what you're talking about. And then when you're getting time with them, you really need to be on their schedule. In the state of Washington, we had these weeks where it was called committee days, right before the session started, where everyone was in town and you could get time with them. And I would schedule time as aggressively as I could with everybody. And then when thinking about the legislature, you also have to think about the person who is their personal assistant. Every representative and senator in the state of Washington had a legislative assistant, and it was even more imperative that I got FaceTime with them. So every time I was in the Capitol, I would stop by to say hi. And it's really important because they're the ones that really are the gates. They control who gets to see, who does not get to see the legislators. And so I made sure that I was friendly and that I had a really good relationship with them. And then finally, anyone that I had spoke to or met in person, I always wrote a handwritten thank you note. And it turns out that just people aren't doing that anymore, and so it helped differentiate my approach from other people's. Motivation is going to be a really important aspect. I don't want to scare anybody, but this can be a very long process. 2 years is actually fairly quick, and motivation is going to be the thing that gets you through. It's also referred to as being persevering or persistent through it. And so you really have to find that motivation from within yourself to go do it, and surround yourself by people that support and encourage you to make that happen. And as I mentioned, it's really, really nice to have friends in the Capitol. So those legislative assistants, whenever I go to the Capitol, I would meet with probably about 40 of them. And it was just nice to see a friendly face, and they would say hi, and we get to chit chat just for a minute. And it was really nice to have people down there that I knew before I got down there. And the motivation cuts both ways. You'll find lawmakers that are motivated to support you, and some that will actively try to block you. And you'll just never really know what their motivations are. Even the people that are trying to support you, there may be a larger thing that they're trying to do in politics, and that's okay. And you'll just never know what the motivation behind that is. And then the last one is leveraging your network. So the great thing about our EGID community is that we may be small, but we're very boisterous. And so there's a lot of people willing and happy to help. And that's a really good thing. And I leverage my network throughout, both coming and providing testimony, which is really critical, and calling and helping out with calling their local representatives for help. But it's also important to really internalize the fact that these people represent you. And so you really have to be the strong leader and helping to push forward through this legislation and laws. But you should leverage other people as much as you can, but know that they are representing your issue. And so oftentimes when we brought people to come provide testimony, I always read it beforehand. I always gave tips and tricks about what they should and shouldn't say, because they were representing the issue that I was helping to drive forward, and they were a key part of it. But it was really important that we were all in a very consistent message. So the inner workings of the legislature, and this is going to be different across the nation. Washington State's is a two-chamber system. Not all are the same. But the one thing that's universal is that you always reach out to your local representative and senators first. It'll be the first question that you get whenever you reach out to somebody. Have you chatted with your representative and senator? And you should always say, yes, I did. I've chatted with them. And then as far as getting bill sponsors, your local representative and senator may not be appropriate to sponsor your bill. I was very fortunate that one of my representatives in my home district was appropriate, but the senator wasn't. He was the majority leader in the Senate, and he wasn't sponsoring any bills. And so I had to go outside of my district to go find a sponsor. But the one thing you can expect is that your home representative and senators should give you time and should be able to help you find other people to sponsor your issue. So the first thing that you need to do after you've done your research, you've started to network, you're understanding what the issue would look like, you need to start looking for a bill sponsor. The big thing that I noticed when trying to find a sponsor is that it's all talk until you actually have something written down. So even if you try your best to take other people's legislation, like the state of Washington ones, and then mock it up to fit your state and come with that handwritten, it is actually far better to try to get a sponsor than if you just talk about an issue and say, will you sponsor me? So actually having that written down is really important. Everything in the legislature works by committee, and there are at least 3 or 4 committees that you have to go through in order to get a bill to the floor. And then in our case, there was 2 chambers to do the same thing. And so equally as important as talking to the bill sponsor, you also have to talk to the committee chairs, because you have to get time with them to understand what was it going to take to get on the schedule, what is it going to take to get a vote, and what is it going to take to pass. And all those things are separate conversations that have to happen during the process. And then in my case, I had a well-respected health lobbyist on our team, and that was a tremendous benefit. Not just any lobbyist, but you have to have a well-respected one. And well-respected means that they already have face time with the right representative and senators, and they're well-respected. And that was a big, big help in my case. So kind of wrapping up what I learned, we talked about it a little bit. So you have to have a handwritten plan. The case of motivation, you have to be able to persist. There's going to be a lot of cases when it just doesn't feel good. I often talk about it as being that you would get positive discouragement, where you would just get told flat out that it's just not going to happen. You have to remain organized. There's just too many moving parts and things moving at the same time to be able to keep it all in your head. You have to write it down. The legislature works in some kind of rhythm, and you have to find it. And that really is helpful to understand, am I falling behind? Am I speeding up? Am I on track? You have to remain present. And so this is back to the handwritten thank you notes really differentiated our approach to others, or having a health lobbyist that was there present when I wasn't. And then understanding that there is the concept of the way the legislature works and the content of your issue. And so you are, and we are, the domain experts in our issue, but there's a whole lot to know about how the legislature runs, and you need to find people that help you understand that. And so in my particular case, I leveraged the legislative assistants. I asked them all just small little questions that actually build up to a bigger picture of what was happening. Like I'd ask one, where is the code advisor's office, which is where they write bills? I asked someone else, what does the code revisor's office do? And so I wouldn't burden any one person, but I leveraged them all as a collective to understand how the process worked. And this is also another place where having a health lobbyist was really, really helpful. So then finally, there was a couple of things that myself and others have felt that helped differentiate our success. As I mentioned, 2 years is actually pretty quick, and I'm very, very fortunate to be successfully completed with changing the law in those 2 sessions. And so Victoria was very nice to point out that she felt that the things that really differentiated what I was up to is that I did a lot of research in advance, I was very well organized, I had clear communication, and I leveraged my network as necessary to get things done. One of my key sponsors in the Senate, Senator David Frock, said it was really up to my persistence that made it done. And if you ask me personally, I felt that it was because I was working with passionate lawmakers, I had a well-respected lobbyist, and I had a compelling problem to solve. Legislatures get inundated with problems all the time, so you have to really have a compelling problem that needs to be fixed. So wrapping up, there are a ton of really great resources. If you're interested in a little bit more about the story, about how we got this successfully through, at the completion of it, I did write a book, The Citizen Lobbyist, The Citizen's Point of View, happens to be my point of view. So the first half is all about the process, all the nuts and bolts about how I got it through the session twice. And the second half is a little bit more about what I feel helped make it successful. The other big one is that you have to really get to know your state's legislative website. It has a treasure trove of information on it, but you have to be able to go after and find it. And then there's specific links about the things that we did in Washington State. The 2 bills that we helped get passed, the Department of Health Sunrise Review, which has a very detailed review of EGID's impact inside Washington State, and then the 2 laws that we helped write. So thank you for taking the time. I hope this was very useful. Thank you and good luck.